Hey there, we're Chris and Melissa Smith of FamilyBrand.com, husband and wife, parents of 5, and we want to help you unleash the power of your family.
And we know it can be so challenging raising a family, where the return on investment is unmeasured and sometimes it feels like your efforts are completely unnoticed. It takes real courage and commitment and a long-term vision for what you are building. You're building a family.
And as entrepreneurs, we always think it's so interesting how your brand at home is the one that you think about the least. But at the end of your life, it will be the brand that matters the most. And look, none of us want to wake up one day feeling like, man, we missed it. Like we missed this opportunity to create something really amazing as a family.
So what you can expect from us are actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better parent, a better spouse, and to build a stronger family. The world needs strong families now more than ever, and it starts right here with your family.
Welcome to this episode of the Family Brand Podcast. And this is an episode, an interview, if you will, that I have been wanting to have for a long time. Welcome to the podcast, Monica Swanson.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I was just telling Monica before we hit record that I chickened out meeting her when I lived in Hawaii. I should have met her, but I just started podcasting and Monica already had a podcast, was already an author, and my friend, a mutual friend, was like, hey, you should meet Monica. And I just completely chickened out, which I'm bummed, but we're making it happen.
You're going to have to come back over and just visit.
Yes, I would love that. And I'm glad we're making it happen today.
Yeah.
So Monica is, like I said, a podcaster, an author, a boy mom. She has 4 sons. How old are your sons, Monica?
Yes. We've got, the oldest is about to turn 25, down to 14.
Amazing. And she lives on the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii. And I have a lot of questions for Monica. And I actually put on Instagram asking, what questions do you have for Monica? So I have a few other questions too. And someone commented, I thought it was funny. I said I was interviewing with you, and they said, oh, she's like the OG mommy vlogger. And I was like, oh, wow.
I love that. Time does fly. I felt like I was joining the game late, but now I look back, I'm like, wow, I've been doing this for a while.
And is that kind of where your path started, was with vlogging?
Yes. It was after my 4th son was born, and we had moved from Central Oahu up to the North Shore. So going on 14 years now. And I think I just needed an outlet. And I just kind of started playing around with, what is this blog thing? How do you do it? I mean, I wasn't tech savvy at all. So it took me a long time to figure out the most basic things. But yeah, started with a blog, and that grew to what I'm doing today.
That's cool. And tell us a bit more. I've just touched on it that you're an author. I know you have multiple books. Will you tell us a little bit about what that looks like today?
No. Yes, I love to reflect on the whole journey. And, you never know what the future holds. And I think that's one of my favorite things, even about just my faith journey, is just trusting God and letting him open and close doors. But yeah, it was, I had been homeschooling my boys. I'd been primarily a stay-at-home mom. My background is kind of health and fitness stuff, but I had really dedicated my time to raising our sons. And then when we moved to the North Shore, started the blog, very part-time. It was, goodness, I try to remember 3-4 years into it, maybe even more. But I wrote a blog post. At that point, my 2nd son had become a teenager, so I had 2 teenage boys. And I kind of randomly threw together a blog post called What Your Teenage Son Needs Most from You. And it was just one of those moments that you can't predict. The stars aligned. It was a whole lot of factors, I suppose, but it went viral. So, in a couple weeks' time, there were millions of people who had read it, and I was just getting all this new traffic and emails and all the rest. So that kind of put me on the map, I suppose. And then I followed that with similar topics, what your elementary age child needs most, what your middle school kid needs, and just continued to have a lot of viral activity. And of course, that started to open doors for publishers and a book agent. So in 2019, I wrote my first book, Boy Mom. Well, I actually had self-published a little book kind of in the health and fitness world, but that's a different topic. We'll stay on this today. But Boy Mom came out in 2019. That was super fun. Just a lot of my journey of raising these boys, and kind of course, grew out of that blog post. And then a year ago, I released my book, Raising Amazing. And that's a little bit more general parenting, a bit more faith, character. And my husband added to each chapter. So that was kind of cool because it's really for moms and dads. And it's about raising sons and daughters. So Raising Amazing was super fun. And then, yeah, this spring came out with Becoming Homeschoolers, which I think we'll talk more about today. But kind of when I realized, it was as I was wrapping up my book, Raising Amazing, that I just started to realize, like, I've kind of held back talking about homeschooling, mostly because I know that the general population, like, it's still a relatively small percentage of parents homeschool. And I always want to write and speak in such a way that encourages everyone. I never want to be, exclusive to just homeschoolers. But as I wrapped up my book, Raising Amazing, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't think I've been completely honest. Like, people ask me, what's the secret sauce? Your boys are best friends. They love the Lord. You have a great relationship. They've made good choices. And I'm always giving various advice, which is all true. But I was like, the truth is, nothing has impacted my kids more. Next to their relationship with Jesus, nothing has impacted them more than the fact that we homeschooled. And so I need to come out and tell the truth here. And so that's when I decided to write a book sharing our journey, but also really a guidebook for anyone who might be on the fence, thinking about it. Maybe they don't think they can. And I'm like, listen, if I can do it, I'm the last person I ever imagined homeschooling, and I did it. I'm still doing it. So I give kind of a guidebook from preschool to college on how homeschooling works and how you can have a great time. Some hard days, yes, but overall, we've had such a awesome journey raising our boys, homeschooling our boys. And so that's kind of where I've been camping out since May when that book came out.
Amazing. And I do want to spend the majority of our time talking about homeschool, but I want to back up and ask you a couple of things.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever read your post, what your teenage son needs most from you. And not to put you on the spot, but what does my teenage son need most from me?
I know. Isn't it funny? I think I shared 11 things. I'll send you a link to it so you can share it in show notes or whatever if you want to. But I mean, even that post, similar to homeschooling, I didn't want my faith to be too central to my writing because I wanted to welcome people into my world. Faith is mentioned in there, but a lot of it was things like, they need a safe place to figure out who they are. Like, teenagers are always, identity is such a huge topic. We could
Totally.
camp out on that all day,
Yeah.
but just giving them a safe and secure place. Teenagers need, boundaries and freedoms. They need, moms and dads to say no and to not try to be their best friend. But they also do need to stretch their wings and have some freedom, increasing freedom as they prove responsible. So I always laugh because I'm like, that post was not rocket science. There was nothing brand new in there. It was just the same stuff any other wise, seasoned parent would say. But again, it was just the timing. It was everything. And I always look back at that and just scratch my head and say, wow, Lord, thank you. That was fun.
Well, cool. I look forward to reading that. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. So I know that you, like we mentioned, you have 4 sons. And tell me their ages.
Yes, all of them. So the first 3 are all legal adults somehow. So I have a 25 and a 23-year-old who both went to Westmont College in Montecito, Santa Barbara area, California. And the second one just graduated. So they both have graduated from college and they both got real jobs. They're adulting, financially independent, living in the Santa Barbara area. They're very close to each other. They go to church together, hang out together. So that's been really a sweet season for them. My 20-year-old lives at home officially, but fun fact about him is that he's a professional surfer. You probably know that. And so he travels the world much of the year. He's all over the place wherever there's good waves, but sometimes he's home because we have good waves here on the North Shore of Oahu. So he's taking college online. Luke Swanson is his name. If you search for him on Instagram, you'll see his amazing surfing. We're so proud of him. He's super smart. I wish he could have had a college experience because I think he would have loved it, but surfing doesn't really lend to that easily. So he just has sponsors that support him and he gets to compete and, ultimately has the goal of being on the world tour, but right now is kind of in the there's a process to get there. So that's Luke. Love having him around. And he's also best friends and a great big brother to Levi, who's my 14-year-old, who is an ambitious golfer. And he started golfing at about 10, started competing about a year ago. And as we're recording, he's in Palm Desert at a world championship golf tournament. So he's working hard to pursue golfing. And I homeschool him. And he's my little rascal. He keeps me humble. And I just love that I get to stretch out this parenting thing because I really am not ready to be an empty nester yet. So I love that even though I'm getting older, I had my youngest just before I turned 40. So it's been fun to parent him and kind of pretend I'm still young when really I'm not.
My mom had her youngest, I think she was 40, and that's what she still says. She's like, her last two actually. She's like, they keep me young, like
Yeah.
still, doing he's 22 now. So she's like barely doing the.
Right. Well, I'd
That's
say, not that you're asking, but if people have advice when it comes to having kids, I'm like, don't do anything permanent until you're 40. Like, because you never know. I thought we were done. And there was a 6.5-year gap between number 3 and number 4. And so I'm so glad because he's added so much to our family.
That's cool. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about my little brothers too. They're 17 years apart from me. I'm the oldest. And
wow.
my younger brother, doesn't ever remember me like living there, but I can't imagine our family without him because he's like the best uncle to my kids now.
Yeah.
A fun and different kind of family dynamic.
So fun. I love it.
Okay, you have boys with such varied interests and but they're like going for it in their own like unique and varied ways. And I hear this from families a lot. They say, how do I support my kids in finding out like what they're good at or what their dreams are or like going for it? How have you been able to do that for your sons in these like such different ways?
Right. Goodness, I think that I wish there was like a formula for that as well as so many other things. But I think I definitely think it helps if you are around your kids a lot. And homeschooling is going to lend to that really well. I know it's not an option for everyone, but if there's any way to get creative and find a way to, whatever it might be, work from home or change your hours, I just think time with kids is huge. And once you get to know them and you kind of just try different things, of course, within reason, you can't run your kids all around all the time, but, expose them to many things. Let them try things and eventually something usually clicks. And I know often I hear from people who are like, well, my kid hasn't found their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Should I be worried? And I'm like, no, that's good. Like there was a time, at least when I was growing up, where not everyone found their thing by 8 years old, right? Like you were just a kid doing maybe different sports in different seasons, trying different things. That's healthy. That's more normal. But usually something will click. So like for my older two boys, they were just kind of well-rounded kids doing all the different things. And it took until later high school that certain things started to click, whether it was things like playing guitar or doing ministry or, certain sports. They weren't world champs at anything, but they were starting to take them more serious and invest more. And then in college, it really blossomed and they kind of figured out their path. So I tell people, chill out. If you have that kid that finds something my 10-year-old was like, I want to be a professional golfer. So we're like, okay, we're going to support that the best we can.
Yeah.
But that's not most typical.
So chill out.
Chill out. Enjoy the process, but keep it, there's sacrifice. Like my husband does not have much of a life. He gets home from work and he takes my son to the driving range or he's with him doing golf stuff. He filmed my surfer son surfing almost every day after work. Like there is huge sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think once you kind of own that and you realize this is who I am as a parent, like life isn't about me anymore, it just becomes a really beautiful thing. And even if your kids don't make it in whatever it is, you've still poured into them and supported them. And I think that makes them feel so loved.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, let's shift to all of these homeschool questions that I want to get into. First of all, let's start with, so I told you briefly before we started recording that I have homeschooled. I am homeschooling, but I don't homeschool all my kids. But I still get people
Right.
that will ask me questions about
Sure.
homeschooling because we have done it for a long time. And the question that, or sometimes not even a question, it's maybe an observation or a comment that almost everyone gives me is, I could never homeschool.
Yeah.
And I'm always telling them, you could, you actually could.
Mhm.
What would you say to a mom or dad who is listening who feels like this is on my heart, I think I want to do it, but I don't feel like I'm cut out for it or I could never do it?
Yeah. I'd say welcome to the team. Like, I've yet to meet a homeschool mom that says, "Oh yeah, I feel totally cut out for it," or "I felt it when I started." I mean, I was terrified. I share in my book and have said many times, I really struggled with my temper. Um, I dreaded summers when my kids were going to their little private preschool and my oldest son went through first grade. I would be like, "Oh my goodness, what am I going to do over the summer? So many hours with them." And yet something shifts when you homeschool. I mean, for one thing, you do have somewhat of a schedule. And I think that really helps just give you more of a rhythm and a routine to your day. But when you're not always in a hurry, I think there's something about most of us are in a hurry all the time. We're hurrying to get kids to school, hurrying to get them home, hurrying to get their homework done, hurrying to their sports. That level of stress is so unhealthy. And I think that was the root of a lot of my anger was just always feeling that pressure. When all of a sudden you're on nobody else's schedule but your own, there's like this ease that comes over the whole family. And I feel like for you, it might be different because you might be running certain kids to certain places while you're trying to homeschool. But I would say if you have everyone at home, there is just this natural ease that kind of falls on your family. So it's really beautiful. I also would just say if you're telling me you can't, why? Like, tell me why you think you can't. Most of the time, people are going to say, "Oh, I butt heads with my kid," or "I don't have the patience." To which I'm going to give some big sister love and say, you know what? It might be time for you to grow in that area. Like, we all need better character. What better way to develop it than to say, "I'm going to do something hard"? It's not so much a homeschooling issue as a parenting issue. So it's time for you to reevaluate your relationship with your kid. Um, how are you handling things? You need to be the adult. You need to be mature. You need to control your own emotions, but you also need to give some consequences. If they're not respecting you and honoring you, this again, my last son has put me to the test. But it's a parenting issue if he's being disrespectful. So I need to practice better parenting. And then you all grow and then you're like, "Oh my goodness, I could have avoided that by just dishing them off all the time, sending them to school, sending them to sports, sending them to summer camp." You would never then have that relationship. But if you have to get through it, you're going to grow, they're going to grow, everyone's going to be better for it. So let's do hard things. How's that?
I love it. That it's like so honest and real, which I love. I
Yeah.
think
And it's just not the way our culture operates right now. Like, it's countercultural for sure, but I think it's really important for all of us. Whether it's homeschooling or anything else, let's just face the hard things and grow through it.
yeah. And on a personal note, I've been homeschooling all my kids. I have one high schooler that wants to, be with his friends and everything. But most recently, I have been homeschooling my first grader and fourth grader and sixth grader. But my first grader is my youngest, and she is giving me a run for my money and making me question everything. So
Oh, yeah.
on a personal level, I appreciate that advice because I'm in the middle of that decision. Like, okay, what are we going to do next year? Because it has been very confronting homeschooling her.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we can find a better curriculum fit, or sometimes I've had people come in the house before, like teenagers who are homeschooled to help with my youngest because like they need one-on-one, but I need to be able to rotate between everyone else. So I think sometimes there's some creative solutions, but you look at the things that are causing problems and you think, what would that look like if I let them go to school? Would that area of their character be better? Or would I just be feeding into it by letting them go? And usually I think we can do a better job at home if we give the proper discipline, consequences, all that, and help shape their character, even if it's hard.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for
Yeah.
what was the catalyst? You said your oldest son went to first grade. What was was there like something that happened or what caused that decision to happen that you
Right.
homeschool?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like so many other people, especially of my generation, I just thought I never considered homeschooling. I thought homeschoolers were weird. And I think, probably for good reason. I grew up, the few people I knew that homeschooled were super quirky and odd. My husband felt the same way. We both went to public schools. But it was when my first son came home from first grade, and I guess he had met some kids at church and Sunday school who had been homeschooled, and he loved to learn. He was kind of a nerdy little guy who loved books. And I think he thought, oh, if I homeschooled, I could just learn all day. And I think he had faced a few things socially at school that weren't very pleasant. I don't know if it was bullying, but a little bit maybe. Here in Hawaii, we have some, depending on where you live, but sometimes, it's the white kids, the haoles that can be picked on, and um, so he asked, and I was like, "Oh, haha, no way! Like, are you kidding?" And kind of brushed it off. But then that kept going through my head, and by then I had met a few people too who were homeschooling, and I love the Lord, and oh my goodness, I love my kids so much. And I wanted to be with them, and yet I also couldn't wait for breaks from them. So I had this kind of conflict. But over that summer, I really just wrestled with it. I brought it up to my husband, who quickly dismissed it as well initially. But then we prayed, and I thought, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? He'll be in second grade. His little brother will be in kindergarten. What if we just try? And so we gave it a shot, and there's no looking back. I mean, no doubt the first year, if anyone is listening and just starting, I cried a lot. Like, there were a lot of hard moments, but by the end of that year, what I saw in our kids, and the character and the relationships, and seeing them learn and get excited about learning, I was like, there's no way we're going to do this the rest of their years.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
What do you, it can kind of be overwhelming. Like if you're making that decision, like, okay, we are going to homeschool, we're going to
Yeah.
try it. What
Yep.
would, I remember like spending so much time researching, like what's the best
Oh, yeah.
curriculum and where's,
Yeah.
all of the things.
Yeah.
And it can be super overwhelming and discouraging, even being like, I don't even know where to start. What would
Yep.
be your advice to a parent who's feeling that way?
Yeah. Well, I'd say get my book, because I really do break things down. I think I try to keep things really practical and really reasonable. We all know, those of us who have homeschooled for a little while, that curriculum's not the biggest deal, that like you're going to be fine. Most of us switch around anyway. So, yeah, you want to do some research, you want to talk to some friends, but at the end of the day, your kids are going to learn, and you really don't need to spend a fortune, and you don't need to overthink it, though most of us have. But I have like a guide to curriculums. I have all of that in the book. So I say just choose something and trust the process, that just by being together at home and having a happy home environment is going to really bless your kids so much. And the rest you can figure out as you go. Like, just, it might take some self talk, but really try not to get overwhelmed. Try to trust those of us who have gone before you to say, it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. Just enjoy it. Try to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said too about how things might change. You might choose a curriculum and the
Absolutely.
next year you're like, that didn't work. Or even in the middle of the year,
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
let's shift.
It's so true.
And
Yes.
it's okay.
It's all good. We all do it.
Totally. Okay. The couple of the questions that I got from people were testing. They're asking about, well, how do you know if your child is where they need to be? And how do you do testing? And I know every state can be different, what they require,
Right.
but what would you say to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, standardized testing is kind of state by state, and I give links in the book to like where you can go to find out what your state requirements are, because you do want to, be legal and all that. Some here in Hawaii, I think there's 3 different years that you are required to turn in standardized testing, and they invite you to either do it at the school, or if you have a college degree, I think you can do it at home, but there's probably other ways around that. Um and yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about grades, especially when they're young. I know we like to tell people, oh, so and so's in third grade or in sixth grade, but it doesn't really matter until they're in high school.
Mhm.
So I would get a curriculum that you think is suited for their age, and if they're really struggling, then go back and do a different year. Don't be too tied to that. My 2 oldest sons both graduated and ended up taking a gap year, so they went to college older anyways. So wherever you need the break, or if you're like, this is too easy, bump them up a year. Get them doing some harder stuff. You want them to be challenged. But definitely, don't worry too much about what grade they're in until they're in high school. Then you got to start keeping some records and know what grade they are. If they want to do school beyond high school. Not every kid wants to do college. I don't think college is for everyone. It's not the best way to go. But if you want to keep that college door open, which I do recommend, I really encourage families, even if you think your kid's not cut out for college, they tell you they don't want to go, I would still say, do what you have to do to make sure they've done enough that if they change their mind, they can go to college.
Awesome. And that kind of leads to another question I had that I myself am curious about, and I hear from other people too. I've never had a kid graduate homeschool or high school and I'm wanting to go into college. And I hear from people a lot asking me like, well, what if they want to go to college? Like, and they don't have, all they have are the home transcripts and, all of that entails. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest stressor for parents who have kids who are either older or just starting off even, and they're like, oh no, I could never get them into college. Like I said, there is a little bit more you need to know if you're, from the time your child is in ninth grade, but it's not as bad as most people think. Depending on what their goals are, really, you can create a transcript at home. There's tons of online free resources to create a transcript. You can also hire someone for pretty low price. Like there's a lot of options, and I link to those in the book, or you can do a Google search and find it. So the transcript is not that big of a deal. And then really, again, I'm learning now because my fourth son is a golfer and he would really like to play Division I or II golf in college. So the one thing I'm still learning currently is the NCAA requirements are pretty crazy. So that's the one exception. And I do mention this in the book, but I've learned more even since writing it, that if you have an athletic child that hopes to play in Division I or II NCAA, then you want to go online and do some research. I'm going to add to my resource section in the book, which is all online, thankfully, so I can add to it. But I'm going to add some of what I'm learning. So that's the one time where it gets tricky. Other than that, if your kid scores well on SAT, ACT test, if you've got, you cover the core classes that they would be doing if they were in a public school, which you can look up online easily, you give them a well-rounded life. You make sure they're involved in social activities. They're leading something, like plug them into a good range. A lot of colleges today are actually seeking out homeschool kids because they're finding more and more that they make great college students, that they're organized, that they're self-directed, that they're great on campus, that they do well in school because they've spent their years really living a life very similar. My college boys have told me that they felt in college like it was an extension of homeschooling. They were like, we pretty much did the same thing other than we walked from our dorm to our college classes, but we still had to manage our own time. We had to, they felt like they were more prepared than their friends who had gone to a traditional school because their friends had somebody telling them every day what to do, where to be, when to go, when to study. And my boys were like, we had to organize our own time. So they felt really well prepared, but it's doable. There's a little more you need to know, but I walk you through everything in the book, and you can do it. You can do it.
I love that. That's a great message to keep repeating here and to yourself if you're listening.
And also, I'll just add to that our goal as homeschool parents, by the time our kids are in high school, we want them to become more and more independent. So you want to start communicating to your kids, 8th, 9th grade, this college thing is out there. If you want to do it, you need to kind of start that process as early as possible. So if you can bring your child to visit a college, maybe inspire them by giving them a tour, talking about it. Then as they get closer, you put more and more responsibility on them. Like, hey, here's an application. You need to start looking at it. What we don't want to be is the parent that does everything for them. That's not preparing them, and it's not going to be a good way to go. So you want to put the responsibility on them.
Okay, I want to give you the opportunity to give your closing thoughts, but one last question first, which is, again, it's another question that I hear a lot, not as much now as I did at the beginning, but it's like, but what about your kid socially? How will your kid interact with friends and people around them if they homeschool?
Right. I love this question, and I tackle it from a few different angles in the book because I do confess that as someone who's homeschooled now for a long time, I'm like, this question can get really old. Like, we're like, are you kidding? People are still asking that. And yet, I confess, I was one of those people that thought that, 20 plus years ago. So fair enough. And I'm sure there are some homeschooled kids out there that are super weird and unsocialized. And so there's that. But I'm like, but I went to public school and we had some really weird kids in public school too, right? Can all of us remember wherever you went to school, there's weird kids out there, like bizarre things. And so at the end of the day, our kids are most likely to become like us wherever they go to school. But if they're homeschooled, even more so. So mom, dad, if you're kind of quirky and odd, there's a very good chance your kid will grow up to be like you. Now, with that being said, I like to say there's worse things in the world than my kid growing up a little bit socially awkward. There really is. Like, you look at some of the most rich and famous people, Elon Musk or, any of those guys, they're quirky, but they're super successful. So I say it's not that bad of a thing to raise a kid who's a little quirky, if that happens. Though most of the time it's not going to happen, because if you are socially adjusted, you have a life outside the home, your kids are going to be like you. So the most important thing you can do is model for them what it looks like to be a well-adjusted adult, to keep them involved in things. I mean, we've got sports, we've got youth group, we've got homeschool co-ops. Most people I know do not hole up in their house all day, every day. They get their kids out. And most people I know today who have homeschooled, their kids are the most well-adjusted kids. Adults are always like, oh my goodness, your son can look at me in the eyes and have a conversation. He is amazing. I believe there's a reason my boys got great jobs right out of college, because they can communicate with adults. And so I think it's not something to worry about. I would say today in the world we live in, I'm much more worried about the type of socialization that goes on in schools.
Yeah.
I personally do not want my kids socialized by what I see out there in our culture today. So I'd rather protect them from that and choose their social situation and coach them through it as they grow up and get more and more independence. And so, yeah, that was my long answer. I apologize, but I get really passionate about this one.
No, I loved your answer. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess in closing, I would love to hear, what would be your final advice for a mom or dad listening who's just either already homeschooling, thinking about homeschooling, just give me your best words of advice.
Right. Well, I just say, I would never want to say homeschooling is for everyone. We all have different situations and seasons. And so, I would recommend anyone be prayerful and do your due diligence to talk to people and really think it through. But I think a lot more people would homeschool and love it if they tried it. I think there's a lot of people out there who tell me they've thought about it, but they never got brave enough. I say, just try it. And worst case scenario, you hate it and you put them back in school. It's all good. So I just encourage parents to consider if this might be a good fit in light of all the circumstances in the world, in light of the kinds of things going on in our public school system, the social scene. Homeschooling might be a great option for you. And yet, if you choose not to, then I'm also going to encourage you to be very involved in your child's life. I know this is what you talk about, family brand. That's what this is all about, is just being intentional about the time you have with your kids. The years will fly by. I hate to sound like an old lady, but they will. And so really consider, maybe you can get involved in your kid's school. Maybe you can volunteer, have conversations with your kid every day, and don't back off just because they're teenagers. Keep that relationship going. And if you can homeschool, I say give it a shot.
Thank you. Amazing. So I'm gonna link to Monica's book, Becoming Homeschoolers, and how you can connect with Monica. I know you are on Instagram, and is it Monica Swanson?
On Instagram is at Monica Swanson _. So yeah.
Okay. And then what's your website?
Yes, just monicaswanson.com has links to everything there as well. All my books, blog posts, and podcast, everything.
Okay, awesome. And we'll link to all that in the show notes. So go give Monica a follow. Thank you, Monica, for your time and your wisdom that you shared here today.
Oh, thanks so much for letting me share. This was super fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Family Brand Podcast. To say thank you, we have something really awesome we'd love to share with you.
We often hear from families who will tell us that they just feel so overwhelmed because of the demands that are placed on them. They feel like they're constantly being pulled in so many different directions and spread thin, and they're spending time as a family, but they don't feel like it's quality time. They're not really connected, and they want to be more intentional. And we can certainly relate because we felt like that at one point in our family. And so we created a guide that allowed us to really be more confident around how we spend time as a family and what we say yes to and what we say no to. And it's just brought so much more peace into our home. It's made our lives so much more simple, and we want to share it with you. So if you go to familybrand.com/free, you can download the How to Take Back Your Family's Time guide, and I can promise you it'll give you more confidence and more peace in your life and in your family.
One last thing, we feel so inspired when we hear from families that we are making a difference for them. We would love it if you would leave us a 5-star rating and a review on the podcast so we can reach even more amazing families. We truly believe that the way we change the world is one family at a time.